It's time again for the Beat the Often Path podcast. I'm your host, Ross Palmer. On this show, we showcase unusual success stories because we're living in very unusual times, and unusual times call for unusual success stories. My guest today is Evan Ruffa, a very, very inspiring Chicago nonprofit founder. He dispels so many myths about starting a nonprofit. In this episode, he talks about the misconceptions that if you start a nonprofit, you can't make money, about funding, about they have to beg for funding. He covers all of this gold stuff. He talks about how you can combine business with art in a meaningful way while keeping your objective, social impact, and a mission at the forefront instead of profits. It's going to be a deeply life-altering podcast for many of you. It's definitely going to get me thinking a lot. He is the founder of IPaintMyMind.org, and he has done so many cool things in and around Chicago. There's just a lot to be learned in terms of an unusual success story here, so I'm very pleased to announce Evan Ruffa. All right, so joining me here, Evan Ruffa, like the roof is on fire, I've been recently told. Thanks for joining me, man. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Ross. Glad to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Oh, you're very welcome. Well, a mutual friend of ours, a man who alternatively goes by the name of Matt Cornelison or Nate Katanis, humorous, very unusual guy, introduced us. He has a fictional fake business influencer persona, which I really dig because we kind of both did the same thing. So by way of him, I met you, Evan. So welcome, man.
Yeah, no, thanks. It's always good to get connected through good people. Matt's a great dude.
Definitely he is. So, I mean, I've done a little bit of digging in what you're up to, and obviously seems to be really cool. You're up to a lot. You got a big web presence. You're all over the place. So maybe just fill us in. Like, what's your current work? What's a day in the life of your work?
Wow. Well, these days, obviously, it's it's November 2020, so we're closing in on a wild year, obviously. But I kind of as far as encapsulating who I am and what I do, I'm a creative entrepreneur. So yeah, I run a nonprofit arts organization called IPaintMyMind, and our mission is to connect communities through art. And so yeah, that's the bulk of what I'm up to. But then I also do work on other creative projects, curation projects, my own art, some marketing stuff. And actually I'm also kind of getting another business ready to launch for next year. So yeah, man, I kind of, if you go to my website, I kind of talk about just loving to create, solve creative problems. And so, and solve problems creatively. And so a lot of times that has to do with art, but most of the time it's kind of at this nexus of art and mission. So yeah, a lot of what we do at IPaintMyMind is about using art as a vehicle for impact and connecting folks.
That is just super awesome. One thing I did see, I saw a few images of you. There's one of you drinking a Tecate, which immediately calls into question your taste, because everybody knows that Modelo is infinitely better.
Well, see, hey, and I appreciate that because I prefer Modelo as well. However, if you put a cold Tecate in front of me, I am not mad at that. So say what you will, but yeah, if anyone puts a cold Tecate in front of me, I'm slamming that as well.
All right, fair enough. We'll agree to disagree. No, I'm just kidding. All right, so no, very cool stuff. I guess the immediate question is, how the hell did you get on this path? I mean, how does one go?
Sure.
Tell me the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think it's interesting because for me, kind of where I come from is kind of why I do the work that I do. So, for us at IPaintMyMind, a lot of what we're doing is working with artists, businesses, and communities to basically execute cool art programs that connect folks, right? So, for me, when I kind of think about why I do that work, it kind of does come back to the genesis story of sorts. I've grown up in Chicago my whole life, on the north side of Chicago in Rogers Park. My dad is from Argentina. My mom is from Kansas. They met in Spain and then settled here in Chicago. So I'm a multicultural kid. I kind of think of myself as a global citizen, very much an urban kid. Like, I'm drawn to urban spaces. I love concrete, actually. Green is cool too, but like, I definitely come from the city. And yeah, I kind of really kind of think about my experience as kind of being uh, this cultural spy. So like being someone who comes from uh, a white background on both sides, but on one of those sides being Latino. So I'm a white Latino. I grew up in a house where we speak Spanish even more than English, and we kind of go through languages and use them both when we need them. And I think that kind of upbringing put me in a bilingual immersion school that was very much about art and activism. So, I kind of always recall on this experience in fourth grade where it was like we turned the hallways into the rainforest. It was like the rainforest exhibit, right? But like when you walk through that hallway, it was a rainforest, right? And so I just really kind of think about those experiences as a kid, whether it was that rainforest or seeing Salvador Dali's original works in Paris as a young person, right? Or just like some of these moments where art and creativity and usually an experience of that art really just kind of blows our minds, right? And kind of gets us excited about the world and what we can make and what we can contribute. So, when I kind of look back, I think being raised in a family where like I was embracing my cultural identity, proud of it, really engaging with other people's cultural identities and being creative kind of all the way through that. I kind of thought of myself more as like an organizer and a do-gooder than a creative necessarily, but kind of as I look back, it's kind of all very, very intertwined. And so, yeah, I ended up, my kind of weird fork in the road was I was going to go to college to play soccer. I played competitive soccer all growing up. And then I got hurt on the second day of tryouts, ended up favoring cigarettes instead of soccer, and actually did a lot of like activist work in college, right? So basically after college, I kind of got really into all these different social issues, and then was kind of a little bit hot under the collar, you might say, as far as like the nonprofit sector not thinking about sustainable ways to fund the work, right? So it was like, you want to do all this great work in the world, but how are you going to make it happen? Where's the cash, right? Like, got to fund it. And so, that kind of like bridges kind of that gap from college. I kept working in nonprofits, worked for the Citizens Utility Board, which did a lot of advocacy work, a lot of direct action stuff, representing workers and ensuring people were getting paid their wages and things like that. And then, I Paint My Mind was really kind of putting the critique about nonprofits, bringing my kind of creative and curatorial way of being in the world, and then doing it so that mutual benefit could be created and we could connect with folks, right? So I Paint My Mind became a nonprofit in 2012. We launched a gallery, and since have kind of developed our different services, whether art rentals or mural commissions, which are essentially these mission-aligned services that allow us to fund the work. So when Adidas hires us to curate rotating art for their Originals flagship store on Milwaukee Avenue in Chicago, we use a large chunk of the revenue from that project to fund free art programs in local schools. So, really what, and we're all about testing. We've learned a ton along the way, but I do think one thing that we didn't have all the way figured out, but we definitely were kind of sniffing at the solution. It was all about how do we create mission aligned value generating services that can fund the work, right? So I'm proud to say that that's been working, and that I Paint My Mind is over 90% earned income right now, which is in the nonprofit sector completely unheard of. Most folks are really relying on grants and kind of the typical way that nonprofits fund, but we're happy to say that our model is working and growing, and we've actually even been able to add to the team this year despite everything that's been going on. So I feel lucky to be able to kind of take a big picture lens on this and feel kind of positive despite all the flux in the world. But I think huge, for me it's that's kind of the ebb story.
Okay. Well, we have a lot of overlap, I just noticed. So you probably don't know this about me, but my wife is Dutch. So I lived in Europe for many years, actually, for 8 years. And my wife is herself half Costa Rican and half Dutch. So her dad is 100% Costa Rican. And now we're raising a kid here in the U.S. So we've
I
got a
love
lot of that
that.
going on. And also soccer was my life for many, many years until I had an ACL injury in high school. And then that
Oh, wow, man.
put me on a path of theater, and then I became a theater kid. I
There
was
you
on
go.
crutches. So
Forks
there's
in
a
the
lot
road,
of
man.
overlap there, man.
That's
But
interesting.
I think one of the coolest things about your story, and one of the most exciting things, is those who know me know that I like things with a little bit more depth to them. I like things, missions, or it's not about the money, 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 money. Who's the richest? Who can do the most? Especially one of my biggest pet peeves is people who just sell junk for $29.99. Like, look, here's a squatty potty. It's a
Sure.
piece of molded plastic or just garbage in advance that we're accumulating all this garbage, poisoning the planet, all of that. So I love the idea of having some kind of better mission, but also maintaining that entrepreneurial spirit, which it seems like you have done really, really well. So that's super, super cool to start.
Cheers.
Um, so yeah, but I'm very curious. So 2012 you started, so 8 years ago. How did you begin that? It's your company, right, or your organization? You founded this. So how did you start it?
Sure. Yeah. So I am the founder. It's a nonprofit. So yeah, I don't own the company, but yeah, I'm the founder and
Oh,
I sit on the
sure.
board
Yeah.
and run the company as the organization as the executive director. But yeah, I think it's interesting. Like, I've always kind of been a curator, right? So the guy who's
Mm.
like, Ross, you got to listen to that record. Oh, did you see that
Yeah.
show? Oh my God, that
Same.
piece of
Yeah.
art. Right. So like, yeah, there was just kind of, I got a cool little bit of encouragement from a buddy a bunch of years ago. He's like, I would read Evan's blog when everybody was like, had blogs, right? And yeah,
Right.
basically that was I Paint My Mind. And it was interesting because like even those words, I Paint My Mind, like come from a John Frusciante song lyric that's like, yeah, just about like, if we're enjoying the beauty, come join me. Right.
Yeah.
If I paint my mind, it's just because I'm alive, right? This idea of just like being creative because you are alive. And yeah, so yeah, a buddy Bill said, "Hey Ev, I'd read your blog," and I started doing that. And yeah, basically it was just kind of like a inexperienced blog. Like I had no idea about SEO or any of that
Sure.
kind of stuff until recently, right? But it was a way to just kind of start putting my kind of curatorial lens out there and consistently publish. And yeah, the kind
Definitely.
of cool thing was so one of our main programs is an art rental program where yeah, Adidas can rent art and then we are able to fund art programs in the school. And actually like back when it was just a blog, few artists started like sending us prints as like thank yous, and I kind of started being like what's going on here, right? And then
Right.
I had also seen this film called Herb and Dorothy. I think you can see the full thing on YouTube actually,
Okay.
and it's about this. Yeah, it's couple in New York City that basically starting, and I think in like the late '50s, basically started collecting art. They would spend one of their salaries on art and one of their salaries on living because you could do that in the '50s in New
Right.
York City.
Totally fine.
But yeah, and then like they basically just like their apartment was full of all this incredible art. They had like the
I think I've seen
beginnings
that
of
at
like
some point.
famous artists. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, it's a really
Or
cool
like
one. It's
not the whole
worth a
thing, but a snippet or something. I think I've seen.
yeah. I would encourage people to revisit it in this
Okay.
lazy Thanksgiving week potentially. But yeah, it's a good one, and just kind of they kind of ended up sharing their art collection with the world. Right. So instead of just keeping it in their apartment, it's then like touring the globe and, inspiring people all over the place. And so we kind of like, that was an interesting little seed of inspiration as far as seeing
Mm.
art coming in and also kind of having a mind to like, how can we do this in a sustainable way or build it in a way that we're not still asking the same question that most nonprofits are, which is, how are you going to fund the work? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, just as we've kind of gotten that on a roll, back in 2012, we became a nonprofit. We're hosting more events around the city, gallery shows, little concerts, film screenings, things like that. And then got a great opportunity to host a gallery space for 4 years. And that's where it kind of the whole art service model started to build out of that. And yeah, and actually in 2017, we sunset that so that we could really focus on connecting with artists, businesses, and communities to leverage more of these services to provide Chicago Public Schools with art programs that are increasingly hard to come by. The
Yeah.
statistics on the defunding of the arts
Oof.
are awful.
Yikes. Yeah.
And so, yeah, it just like feels really good to be able to come into schools and support teachers, support principals, support kids, and really give them these energetic, creative experiences that, like, as I said before, really, I think if we're doing it properly, we are creating more of these moments where the lid is getting blown off a kid's head and they're thinking really about their future in a really cool, personal way.
That is so awesome, man. So maybe tell us a little bit about, like, so what is the model then? It's obviously there's two sides, but what is the model on both sides of the equation?
There's only one side, so I'm glad that you said that.
Okay.
So that's like a big thing, actually. Like, so, and it's part of actually one of my soapboxes. So, you know, and you kind of mentioned it, right? That, like, you're into stuff with mission. I think all of us are. Like, most of us want our interactions with the world, our business interactions, the companies we engage with, to be good citizens as well, right? And to not hasten the end of the world, as you mentioned, right? So I think, like, I have seen a lot of this, like, social entrepreneurship, which, hey, if you're thinking about making the world a better place, I'm not going to knock you too hard. But I think what's happened is a lot of folks with a mind towards business have decided to open for-profit businesses that have some type of social benefit marketing spin. So that's
like
okay.
Tom's, you give a shoe away for every shoe you sell or something like that.
And like I'm saying, exactly. And, like, I'm not mad at Tom's. They've, like, the 1-for-1 model is fantastic. Bombas does a great job with it. There's lots of companies that are really making a great impact. At the same time, they've clearly prioritized their own profitability over that mission. Okay. Right. So, like, again, not to denigrate those folks. I think they're doing really important work, but it is a strategic choice and it favors their pocketbook particularly, right? My whole kind of soapbox is that if there's any type of mission-driven component to your project, it should be a nonprofit for a few reasons.
Wow.
Number one, that it does not limit your ability to sell products and services. Okay. IPaintMyMind is a 501c3 nonprofit. We do art rentals, we do mural consulting, we sell B2C merchandise, we do all, like I said, we're over 90% earned income. This is a huge myth and misconception about revenue generation in the nonprofit sector. So, like, you know, that's the first reason. But I think the second reason is that there's all these incredible benefits to becoming a nonprofit, as far as you, A, actually putting the community ahead of your pocketbook, like, B, being forced to think about what those sustainable revenue sources would be so that you're not doing all this grant and foundation groveling stuff, right? And then, you know, quite frankly, being able to really lean into your messaging because you have been able to put the community's benefit at the same level as, like, the founders, right? And so, you know, at IPaintMyMind, we're not limited at all in selling products and services. And so for us, ensuring that it was a nonprofit, I think means that we can really ensure that our true north around mission stays our true north, and that we not convince ourselves that, like, our profitability personally is also somehow better for the world. I think a lot of folks kind of convince themselves of that because they have a social component to their marketing. And honestly, it's less about, like, denigrating someone's choice to do the social entrepreneur thing on the capital side. To me, the real value and kind of what I'm talking about is the nonprofit sector totally redefining the way we think about the future of good work, right?
Wow.
So, like,
that's huge.
I think so, dude. And that's why every single time that IPaintMyMind is able to succeed, I feel like we're becoming more and more of a case study for how this can be done. And not that we're the only ones doing it, but I do think we're being especially intentional about our funding mix and putting the ball in our court as far as being able to build a solution where we're dictating our future, not going to some outside source to lobby for validation. Right. Which is a lot of what happens in the nonprofit sector. And then you get those
strings attached that maybe you don't want attached.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. And then all of a sudden you're maybe not saying what you would have said a little while ago. And that's how compromises get made. Right. But,
so you're able to maintain independence.
Yes, absolutely. But and more so, you're able to continue doing the work, and it makes it so that even as a nonprofit executive, I spend no time groveling. I just do the work. We do the work. We connect communities through art. It's always mission, whether it's at Adidas or at a school on the South Side, because like we've made the work the work. We don't have to do other work to fund the work.
Yes.
Right. And
Definitely.
so like that totally. So like, for me, I really hope to kind of pull on this thread more, kind of demystify limitations that the nonprofit sector really has put on itself. Like, quite frankly, a lot of us on the social left who want to make the world a better place don't understand business as well as we should. And so it's a knowledge gap. It's a place where things don't go as well. And quite frankly, in nonprofits, I really think efficiency and like impact for your dollars needs to be evaluated as critically as like a top traded stock CEO is thinking about buybacks because we got to get these numbers right. Right. So it's just like, if you care about the mission, efficiency has to be at the top. Like, we can't be wasting budget on shit that isn't the mission,
Right.
And I think once we start to like realize that there are lots of benefits to creating nonprofits, and that we're not sacrificing, we're really just sacrificing a potential IPO at the end of our company.
Okay.
Right? I get paid a salary to work at IPaintMyMind. Like, I'm not out here asking for handouts on the street because I work at a nonprofit.
Which is like
right?
the number one thing. Yeah. It's either how am I going to get paid, or somebody is, embezzling money or paying themselves way too much, right? Those are the two conversations that you generally hear.
Well, and I mean, and quite frankly, I think most of them are not. Those two conversations, I think, are less emblematic of the real issue, which is like, are nonprofits pursuing realistic and sustainable and like mission-driven ways of funding the work? You know what I mean? And I think like, I think that there's more versatility there, and that I think a lot of people really do misunderstand what the limitations are and are not. And so, I really encourage, and this is one of my future projects as well, as far as more writing, and I think a book around kind of demystifying this stuff. But
seems like a great idea.
I just really encourage anyone who's thinking about making the world a better place to not get caught up in this false notion that they're committing themselves to a vow of poverty by starting or being part of a nonprofit, and that somehow they're like limiting themselves, by doing so. I think there's plenty of really great reasons to go nonprofit instead of that kind of for-profit social entrepreneur.
Hey man, I would buy and read that book. That sounds like an awesome
Cheers,
book.
Man.
I think that's a fascinating topic. So do it, please.
Awesome, man.
Get it out there and then send me a link.
I appreciate the encouragement.
Yeah, no, I think that's so incredible, and that's a message that a lot of people need to hear right now. I want to take a quick step back. I mean, there's so many things to unpack there, but so Adidas, I want to go into a couple things. First of all, how do you get clients, or whatever you call them, clients like Adidas, which a lot of people are going to be interested in? And second of all, okay, so let's start with Adidas calls you up. What do they want from you? What are you doing? What are the details there?
Yeah, I mean, I think, most of our partnerships kind of are like a 50-50 split as far as leads driven through our website and word of mouth. So really, we're not doing any kind of like cold outreach. Really, what we've tried to do is, from the marketing perspective, just really offer a ton of value to artists and business owners and teachers and people who love art. I think like getting people in and being excited about our whole get art, give back model is like a pretty easy sell once we know that you're into creativity and making the world, a better place. So, over the last few years, we've totally stepped up our game as far as, I think, adding a ton of value for our heroes, is what we call them, so that they trust us and they see that we're like giving a ton of value before we're even talking about some of the bigger ways that we can work with folks, right?
But like on a technical level, so they're like, we want to fill a space with art, and you provide that art. That art is for sale, or what's going on?
Yeah, sure. I guess I was kind of going back to like how those relationships started. And the other piece is the word of mouth side. But it ends up being like, whether an office or a retail location or commercial real estate, a restaurant, a residential condo building. Most times there's art, sometimes pretty crappy art in some of these locations, right? And so for us, really, what folks I think are more interested in as far as what we're able to offer is connecting them with local working emerging artists who are creating art that is actually accessible, right? So like a lot of times people think of art, they think original painting, $10,000, not for me. I also am not in the market for $10,000 original painting, right? And I think that's why I Paint My Mind has always focused on prints. We're building, we're building a large collection of limited edition prints by local artists from all over the country. So when we rent art to Adidas, they're able to look through a menu of 50 artists, over 1,500 pieces of art. And we're really curating stuff that is more accessible, more emerging, more pop, more graphic.
So are the pieces themselves for sale in the location that they're shown, or is it just they rent and you fill up the space and that it's just a rental deal?
Yeah, it's just a rental. So for us, we're building a permanent collection. Yeah, it's basically a rotating art subscription for that company, right? So the company gets that art rotated on any kind of interval that they like, right? It's all super customizable. And we basically have different like package levels where a company can have the art rotated. If it's a more global company, they can kind of curate that way. If it's a company that really wants to go local, which obviously is often really popular, we're able to do that. We have about 50% of our collection are artists in Chicago, so this is where we're HQ'd. But we also have access to artists nationally and even internationally. So actually looking at a couple partnerships in New York City as of now, looking into next year. And it's really more pop, more accessible, local, thinking about it as like a rotating art subscription that also funds programs in local schools. So
how many pieces would a typical tier be? Like, 20, 50, 100, or does it
it's totally we at first we were like, it could be anything, but that's hard to help folks wrangle it, right? So we have like 4 packages that you can check out on our website. If you go to IPaintMyMind.org, you can check out our different services under what we do, and it kind of gives the different tiers and stuff like that. But it's we can go everywhere from 4 pieces in a small office to 100 pieces in a multi-floor corporate park, right? So it's pretty it can expand and contract, and the nice thing is we really kind of talk about finding the best fit for that partner, whether it's Adidas or a school on the South Side, right? Like I think a lot of times people think about art and curators as like, tell me what to like give it the seal of approval. And while I have very clear opinions about what I like what I Paint My Mind is curating, for us, it's really important that our clients and our partners be involved in what we call a co-curation process, right? That it be reflective of the community, and that we be able to really kind of create this notion of mirrors and windows. So we talk about that in our schools a lot, right? That kids see themselves reflected in the artwork, but that kids also kind of see into other worlds, right? And so that's both
profound.
important for
kids.
Did
you come up with that? That's very cool.
No. Mirrors and windows is not my concept. It's common in education, but it's a perfect lens for thinking about the role that our art intends to play in a space, right? And whether it's you walking into Adidas and seeing the whole Ivy Park Beyonce thing and like 16 pieces of art on the side by a local artist, or just going into a school's main entrance and seeing a curated exhibition that welcomes you into the building, like we all know and can relate to spaces making us feel different ways, right? You walk into a big, incredible, museum foyer like you do at SF MoMA, and you're just like, this is incredible.
This is insane.
Right? And so like spaces tell us how to feel, right? And so we really kind of like this idea of being able to play with the murals and windows concept, and really kind of beating back that like snotty nose, we're cooler than you curator shit, and more being like, this is about us having a dialogue and becoming partners and finding a way to really build a relationship based on that.
So this is such an interesting idea, obviously. I mean, it seems like such a fully formed idea. Was this an aha
Wasn't
moment?
always.
What's the genesis? Yeah, how did you end up? Because, it makes so much sense now that you're talking about it, but
Sure.
8 years ago,
Yeah.
where did it start? How did you get this
Yeah, I mean,
particular idea of renting out art?
yeah, man. I mean, I think here's the thing. I kind of also kick back at this notion of like fully formed ideas dropping over one's head and just like this enlightenment moment. Like, hardly, dude, hardly. Like the first the first art exhibition that we curated into a park district, like Brian, who's on our board, who's been around since the very beginning, like we're literally like framing secondhand or like reframing art with secondhand frames that we bought from like a hotel liquidation center,
Yeah,
right?
okay.
Like,
Wow.
what I would be more focused on is like less these like droplets of genius that filtered to us, and more like being like interested, like driven, and maybe like shameless enough to just fucking try it. Right. And I think there's so many of us that are like really, really precious about our shit. And like so much of this is digital now. It's like, yo, delete and rewrite. Like,
Yep.
People getting crazy about the copy on their website, bro. You could change it tomorrow.
That's true.
And I think there's just a lot of I was kind of simmering on this the other day. I think a lot of what happens with like the social media way of living in the world is that we have more places to kind of like front.
Definitely.
Yeah. And like there's just
huge
more
problem.
Real estate for fronting.
Yes. AKA
and
all
like,
of TikTok. Just kidding. I'm not trying.
It scares me. I've never been on.
Don't. It should scare you. I've been on it, and man, I've talked with Matt about this, but it's a scary place.
Yeah, man. And I think, I think like aside from that, I think like kind of what I was going to tease to is that I think the fact there is more real estate for like our avatars, that like there's it's like even more scary for folks to just fucking try the shit. Like nothing is fully formed. If anybody tells you, like all the little anecdotes that I've offered in this podcast did not happen at the same time, right? They're like points on a line where you come to new understandings of what you've been doing and what you should do. And I think as long as you're like listening to that and okay with like publishing or shipping or launching something that is not 100%, the closer you will actually get to 100%, because the people that you serve will tell you how to get there.
Right. That's so true. And
like,
you probably know that that study, that famous study, where I think it was a college study, where they had two groups of people and they said, okay, you've got a semester and the end project. You know this, right? And they said one needs to make art every single day, and then we're going to judge them on their last piece. And the other one has 6 months to make the best piece of art that they can. And of course, the people who did it every day just crushed the other team. So I believe that
I'm so in favor of like small, consistent steps towards a goal. Like I think a lot of times, like folks, their bigger vision for what it is kind of paralyzes their ability to take that first step. Definitely. And like I've been unsure too, so I've got compassion for that, But I think like as with anything, just like doing the thing flexes the muscle, and you learn stuff by doing that.
And did you start with a partner, or did you start yourself and then bring on a partner, or?
Well, I mean, it started as the website, so it was definitely me. And then as it kind of moved into the nonprofit space, I'm a solo founder. Brian Flannery, I call him our number 2 because he's been along the entire time and is about as close to a co-founder as you could have. Both like just a huge support for me personally as one of my dear friends, but also just like super aligned with the mission and understanding kind of the spark that it launched from. So he's a really huge resource for us, and our entire board is. But yeah, no, it is. I think, I'm a founder type person. I lead stuff. I start stuff. I like building stuff, and so I took a chance on it, and it's honestly, it's super, super validating and just like fulfilling to be able to like work with great artists and companies that give a shit about the world, and teachers that are like out here doing an incredible tireless job like day in and day out. I think kind of just like, yeah, just teasing on the like why I do this stuff. My mom was also a teacher at that school that I had such incredible experiences at. And so I also very much feel like as an organization, we are honoring educators, and find it completely insane that they would be lined up for the first criticism as takers in any context, right?
Yeah.
It's insane to us. The teachers that we work with are just such an encouragement about like the goodwill in the world, but yeah, so yeah, no, I like I said, I'm working on launching another biz. So I think there's probably more
a secret
founding in my
biz
future.
or something you want to talk about?
It's not quite ready yet, so I'll hold off.
All right.
But
To be
it's
continued,
a super passion project. It'll be delicious. I'll say that.
Okay, very good. I'm already starting to think about it. Community food.
Yes.
I like it. A food court of local. Anyway, so do you have a roster of artists that you always work with, or does that rotate too?
Yeah, so we've been lucky to work with tons of really awesome artists over the last years, and for us, kind of going forward, we've established really great relationships with a lot of printmakers in Chicago. Chicago has a really thriving gig poster and screen print community. Just lots of really incredible work. I think some of the first art that I started purchasing for myself and collecting were gig posters, advertising different rock concerts and stuff that I had gone to, right? So it's kind of like one of our inroads into building relationships with folks here locally. But kind of going forward and back to kind of that mirrors and windows concept, we've been doing some really great work kind of behind the scenes as of late, as far as really getting intentional about how we want to continue building out the collection. We've kind of, just come to kind of looking at the communities that we serve, both in Chicago and nationally, and kind of coming to the fact that being able to offer mirrors and windows for any community that we work with and curate art for is basically the goal. So really looking at kind of like the demographics and culture and in the communities that we work with, and really ensuring that like dialogue is a part of that, and also being able to create benchmarks for the next couple of years as far as how we continue to grow the IPaintMyMind permanent print collection. It's exciting because we're just basically about to finalize some really cool specific benchmarks and timelines for just adding more breadth and perspective to our collection, which we think will just be helpful in connecting with more and more communities all over the country.
That is just wonderful, man. Do you yourself paint? Do you make art, or is it just strictly curator organizer?
No, yeah, I did a lot of drawing as a kid, and I think I was also like, despite being encouraged in these ways, I think my leaning towards like soccer had me like invest less in like my own personal art skills as like a younger kid. But I've circled back to all kinds of stuff. I do a lot of kind of like fine art photography, a lot of like color and digital manipulation type stuff. I got into a illustration project where I was like drawing these weird circular amoeba things on puzzles that you could then take apart, but then kind of frame with a couple of the pieces missing. And I actually do most of IPaintMyMind's video. Dabbled in music before, and my next project I think is like, I want to do some large scale painting. I got some fun ideas, but
that sounds great.
Always down to dabble.
Yeah, well, it's funny that this is your world, because I've believed in this. I've actually made many pieces of content about the subject of curation. So a lot of my life has had to do with curation as well. So I started one of the world's largest dance music blogs. And, there's so many millions of artists making great music, but how do you curate that in terms of, what you want to hear? And I got my start in sort of the DJ scene, but was a DJ for many, many years. And of course, being a great DJ is itself just an act of curating, right? You're picking
Sure.
things, you're stringing them together, you're making a set out of disparate pieces. So I really, really believe in the skill of curation as being a valuable skill. I think not a lot of people are
Totally.
thinking that way or talking about it though, but
Yeah.
because you can have, and I talk about taste a lot in things that I do about, there are people who can be very successful, but they have bad taste. Like
Sure.
just because like you can market something to the masses, but maybe if both parties have bad taste, then that can be successful, but not good, if that makes sense. So I think,
Totally.
I'm sure you consider yourself a man of good taste, and I have no doubt that you are, but I think it's just so important to show people not just, art, but like you said, the windows to good taste and say, hey, this is something that is worth seeing. It's not just a blue square on a white painting or
Sure, sure, sure. And I think so. There's a couple pieces that come to mind. I think since everyone is a curator these days, right? Everyone's kind of got
yes,
their own little cross section that they can offer. So I think
yes,
that has even kind of almost even denigrated the role of the curator in our like hyper information. I can scroll through 100 images with three
yes,
thumb rolls type thing. But like to me, curation is about like creating context and like sequencing, right? It's like um, what's around the art.
mm,
What art are you putting around the art? What it's I think it's something that I'm more and more interested in is like just like spaces and interior design as well
yeah,
as like an extension of a lot of the
yeah,
work that we've been doing and kind of like just being in more spaces and kind of yeah, as I said, kind of tapping in more into how certain spaces make us feel. But this with the DJ blog, right? That any great
yes,
DJ, it takes you through those peaks and valleys and builds the
yes.
culminations and then sends you on your
That's it
happy little way,
exactly.
right?
Yes, that's it exactly.
So yeah, I think there's that is the product of a sequence and the product
Yes,
of someone creating context. And although, as I said, I'm super confident in the things that I like, to me, I probably less about like an objective version of what is good or like anything than it is like creating the context and seeing where the dialogue goes.
right. Creating a third thing, the sequence creates a new thing, right? The context, the sequence creates a new thought process that emerges from the totality of what you've put in a space.
Totally. It's just like listening to a full record with 12 tracks versus the
Yes.
single that's number 3, right?
Yes.
Like
Completely.
you get the whole vision, you see the scope and you get the trajectory, right? And I think without context, things can appear differently, right?
Yes.
Or with context, you can kind of reframe your understanding of the thing, right? And so, yeah, it's I think people getting a chance to decide what they like, even just like have that
Mm.
conversation with
Yeah.
themselves. I think it's so
Yeah.
much less about Evan LaRuffa or I Paint My Mind necessarily imposing a certain aesthetic, even though our collection, you'd be able to get that from what we have. I think
Right.
it's kind of the context for our partnerships and our client work is the relationship that we bring to it, right? And so I think being able to build that out and also tie the real value of how art lives and feels and drives energy in a space, like for our clients, and obviously with the backside of that, it's also creating this connection and giving back,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, no,
Very cool.
it's
Well,
all
I'm
very
I'm
interesting.
I'm
Yeah,
also super fascinated with the intersection of business and art. And I don't know how it was in
sure.
Chicago, but where I grew up, I think it was DeVry or one of do you remember those commercials from the 90s where the kid
DeVry for
wants to go
sure.
to art school and the dad is like, you need to go to business. And it's like there's
Wow, I need
tension,
to pull
It's
that
like
up. Yeah,
yeah, right? But I mean, did you remember those commercials as well?
I do.
So it's like
I
you're
do.
either doing business or you are doing art. And if you're doing art, you are going to fail. You will never make money. You will never be successful. And you're here
Yeah,
disproving that right now. Uh,
yeah. And I think I would just the one piece I would just add to that is I think there's no better time to make money on art. Like the world has not you as an artist, anyone as an artist has never had as many tools at their disposal to connect with people who could enjoy their stuff. And so, like all the artists that we buy art from, they're also the CEO of their one person business.
Right.
They are business people as much as they are, as much as they are artists. And I think the kind of the way content has changed, people being able to sell work on demand, being able to create their own websites, market, build followings, just means that it's a great time to become an artist. That's
awesome. So are you able to create some kind of income stream or stable living for a lot of the artists that you work with?
I mean, it's interesting because I think as a nonprofit, a lot of times you kind of get pushed into a corner to try to take credit for more than you should.
Okay.
I guess what I mean is right, you go to any nonprofit site and you'll even see statistics on our website about the impact that we create. But I think a lot of times, I don't know, especially with me, I sometimes don't entirely believe it. And so I guess part of that to me is I just tie it into our artists, and that we're not solely responsible for any of our artists, the artists that we work with, doing really well. They are, okay. Right?
Yeah, sure.
They're the captains of their career. And quite frankly, we gravitate to the artists who are handling their shit, right? But, aside from that, I think that we do create really awesome touch points and become part of the mix of the artist pie that becomes the full pie that offers them the ability to make more art tomorrow.
Yeah, I completely get it.
We're part of it, man. We're part of it. I think I would just hesitate to take say, hey, this artist is there because of us. No,
right.
Yeah, we bought a couple $1,000s worth of prints from an artist that we really support, and she was able to meet a really cool goal recently, and we saw her post about that on Instagram, and we're like, hell yeah, that's dope. Good for you, right?
Yeah.
But it wasn't just because of IPaintMyMind. We were part of, I think, a constellation of support and relationships for those artists.
Well, that's a very noble way to respond to that question.
It's just fair, man. I think, it's just fair.
Okay. To what degree did the movie Wild Style influence you? Do you know?
I'm blanking, dude. What is this?
It's that 80s movie about graffiti. I think it's in New York but it was so I think the main character's name was Zorro or something like that, but he was a graffiti artist, and he was doing graffiti around town, urban setting. I mean, this is one of those iconic hip hop movies of the early 80s, I think. But
jeez,
he does graffiti all over town, and of course it's underground. They're running away from the cops, but then at some point, somebody figures out that he's an artist, and then he gets into a gallery with his graffiti, and then there's this line blurred between graffiti is art. Or it started that train of thought that it's not just bad.
Oh my God,
art.
Fab Five Freddy. Oh my gosh, dude, and Grandmaster. Oh gosh.
Yeah, it's
no, I'm not familiar with this.
You got to get on that. That you must. It's
apparently
mandatory.
Wow.
Well, I would have thought for sure, because I've seen some of the. You're working with murals. You said, right? So street art.
Yeah, totally.
So what's
Yeah, definitely.
What's the deal?
I guess
with
82,
that?
Man. I was born in 83. I guess Wild Style was not not my purview.
Yeah.
You just turned me on.
If anybody in the world should see this movie, it's you. 100%.
I will do my homework.
Yeah. So, but because you're doing murals, you're doing, I don't want to say graffiti, but you're doing things on sides of buildings and other stuff outside, right?
Yeah. So we've done exterior murals and interior murals as well. But it is really amazing to see how popular murals have become in cities and corporate settings. I think obviously the way New York and Chicago have misunderstood and conflated graffiti art and gangs has been sad and ridiculous.
Yes.
In Chicago we still brown out with brown paint anything that's done with a spray can, you know what I mean? Because these fools don't know Latin Kings from a throw up sometimes. It's just it's wild. But yeah, I think it's cool to see, I think, people and companies, quite frankly, embracing art's ability to bring people together. I think it's as we kind of move more and more into experiences gaining more value, I see that trending upward as well.
Interesting. So somebody has a space or a company, they contact you and you're the go-between between them and an artist, or how does that process work?
Yeah, sure. Basically, we kind of manage the entire process. So yeah, a company will come to us. They'll have a particular space that they've identified for a mural, and then we work with them to bring different artists in, give them options, kind of facilitate that process. And yeah, we've got a fun one coming up soon that I'm sure you'll see posted
Sick.
about shortly.
Awesome. So another quick thing, I mean, obviously you've been a go-getter for a very long time. I saw recently you posted on LinkedIn, you just got an executive MBA, possibly another kind of MBA, I think. You posted your certificate.
Just one.
Okay,
Yeah.
just one. I thought I saw two, but okay. So you got an executive MBA. How much do you believe in formal training? Has that impacted is it just for the piece of paper, or was it actually helpful for you to do that?
It was not at all for the piece of paper, really. I mean, I think like it's interesting. Like I as I mentioned, I kind of see myself starting other companies and doing other things like that. So for me, it was very much about just adding tools to the tool belt, just really kind of getting the kind of some of the formal training on stuff that I had already been doing, right? And I think kind of like going back and like learning some of the rules so that I can re-break them intentionally as opposed to just breaking them unintentionally.
Right.
Yeah, you know, I think like I really just love learning. Like I read a ton, like tons of podcasts, films. Like I'm just kind of voracious about it. And so if I can, and it's especially so if I can like apply it directly, right? So like the entire time I was in this program, I was always like, this is how this influences IPaintMyMind and this other project that I'm working on in this specific way. So like just being able to practically apply what I was learning was huge. The other piece is that for our capstone project, the group that I worked with, we worked on the business plan for the business that I'm going to launch next year. So
awesome.
It was very productive.
That's so cool. So, all right, that's great to hear. When you got started in all of this, I think what will be very interesting for some people is what are some of the challenges that got in your way? Was it a smooth path? Were there really rough patches getting it off the ground?
Let's see. Like, I mean, you know, I guess there's, you know, I kind of talk to folks a lot of times about how like sometimes just like I'm killing it, like I'm on top of the world, and the next day you're like, what's going on? Like I don't know what's up and what's down, right? And I think you know, to be honest, there's been plenty of both of those. You know, I think at the same time, like I've been super supported by my wife Lindsay in like her just believing in me and what I was doing, and not really kind of having, I think, maybe some of the external pressures that folks have where like maybe your person isn't exactly rooting for that thing that you're like trying, you know, and like that's not as great. So I'm happy to say that and just lucky to have had, you know, I think that support. You know, I think like the kind of other piece to that is like when you have that, you're more and more driven to like honor that.
Right.
You know, and so like her belief in me, I think has always kind of kept my head above like some of the shit that might wig you out, like not having a lot of money.
Yeah.
Right. But like, I think it's always been really clear to me that like there's things that I really value and things that I can totally go without. And so, you know, I don't have a $5,000 mortgage, and that really helps. But, you know, I think there's just ways where I think we've been able to be intentional about our lives, and honestly lucky. Like, you know, we mentioned before we jumped on the podcast, my folks live around the corner, help with my kids a lot. Like there's things baked in that I think have given me a little more security in saying like, I'm going to go for this, you know? You know, I think, and this has come up actually in some other kind of discussions and podcasts, is like, I don't really feel like I have another option. Like I'm doing this creative problem solving connector curator thing is, I think, kind of my thing. And so I don't, you know, I really, it's been cool to kind of, I think, build build life as intentionally as possible, and also kind of be a little bit resolved in that. Like going to like a job at a desk just doesn't really feel like an option for me. And so that also just kind of, whenever I get kind of uncertain or like doubtful, it's like, dude, what the fuck else are you going to do? Like,
yes, I know that feeling well.
Keep trusting yourself, keep putting the effort in, and, you know, and rest at the end of the day. Right. But like, I think, ensuring that like I'm putting in the effort that honors the support around me and honors, you know, the vision in itself is huge. So, I just feel lucky and grateful to like, be able to put the harder moments in perspective because I have some of that, support.
That's massive. Do you feel that you're living your dream right now? Or if not, what would the dream be?
I love that. I think, you know, we've all got like goals, right? Like, I think there's like, again, the kind of like creative, voracious piece to me would, like quibble a bit with like, framing it that way, because it might be like too, cozy. But like, I do, you know, I do feel really lucky to like really love my life most of the time. And I think because I'm engaged and connected to what I'm doing, that like, some of the raw moments are a little more raw, and like some of the happier moments sometimes feel like they're like, whoa, I'm like high off this. This is like really good. But I think, I think, I'm super lucky, and I think I have all the elements of like a life where someone would say like, that works really well. I think as far as like, the family, the creating kind of this life where I'm able to contribute in a way that I actually care about. So I am living the dream. And
there we go.
And I'm also just really excited about like continuing to work on cool stuff. Yeah.
That's awesome. Who do you look up to most in your space or just in general?
Oh, that's awesome. Wow. That's a nice question. I think it's good. I think probably a lot of us should kind of think about that a little more. And I definitely have like, some mentors and friends that, I totally look up to, I think, as far as like kind of, crafting that intentional creative life, and kind of like, doing so in both, an uncompromising and super compassionate way. You know, someone that's coming to mind is my friend and mentor, Jeffrey Davis, who runs, a company called Tracking Wonder, in New York State, and does a lot of work with creative entrepreneurs and tapping into story and value and mission. And, I've been real lucky to participate in some of his workshops, and also just, be able to call on him as a friend and a mentor, and someone who's, I think, you know, he's just a few years older than me. And so really being able to kind of like, look ahead, and, it's a huge support. And then I'll also say this morning, I called my buddy Talib, who's up in Toronto, just to like get a word on a thing that was wigging me out. And he said the perfect thing, and it was really helpful.
Nice.
But, man, it's, those would be two folks.
The last thing is piece of advice for the youngins out there. Somebody who's listening and thinking, okay, this is something that I want to do. I want to start a nonprofit, but I don't know where to begin. What would you say?
Yeah. I mean, do we have to specify to the nonprofit, or could it be even more like?
No, definitely
a little broader.
Cool. Yeah, broader for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think the things that I would come to are like, I think a lot of times we kind of, in glorifying the fully formed idea, we also glorify the night and day switch. So like telling your job to go fuck themselves, and then like starting this dream project the next day,
I'm gonna do it,
and then like becoming Beyonce, right?
What is Rent?
Like, let's like just bring it down one, right? And I think, it's really, I think, so to the first piece, like maybe if you're not so loving your job, but it like isn't stressful and you can kind of compartmentalize it, start building that other thing while you're not worried about how to pay your rent. You know,
Yeah.
I'm so about the side hustle. Like, prove to yourself that you give a shit enough about it to hustle on it from 5 to 10, 3 nights a week for 6 months. You know, so I think there's that, and then one foot in front of the other. Like, I think we can just get way too far ahead of ourselves on like the vision. Yeah. And that like a vision is the result of adding thousands of little steps to each other, right? And Definitely. So like take the first step, take the second step. They're really small steps if you isolate them in and of itself. They're very doable. And then I think the last piece is like just avoid that preciousness, that like cultural compulsion we have to act like we know what the fuck is going on all the time.
Right. Oh, I love that.
You know,
That's
like
sage advice.
It's just like I've been too unsure too much of the time to start acting like I'm not. You know?
Yes,
so
completely.
Like I just think like it's okay if you're unsure about the thing. If you've gotten it to 80%, like really kick the shit out of it as far as an idea, a concept, and an offering and the value that you're bringing, and then just give it over and let folks help you take it from 80 to 100. You know, I think I've learned so much, and IPaintMyMind has learned so much from being a little less precious, being willing to test, and have the communities that we serve really make the difference in the offerings rising to the top.
I love it, man. So good. All right, two quick things to wrap this up. One, favorite book of all time.
Shit, that's really tough, man. Gosh. Gosh, that's so hard, man. There's just so many.
What comes to mind first?
I will say The Mind of Clear Light by the Dalai Lama, because it's about being okay. Yeah, it's intense, but it's really, really good.
Oh, I like it.
It's about being okay. Yeah, it's about being okay with dying. Great. And it's like it's a really beautiful meditation.
That is awesome. Yes, I love the Dalai Lama's tea. I mean, I had one of those Dalai Lama quote a day calendars for a while, and
there you go.
That was a pretty good year, honestly. Starting every day with one of those was pretty good.
I bet
it helped me out. That's for sure.
For sure.
And I guess the very last thing, put a cherry on top of this whole thing.
Sure.
What is the best piece of advice you've ever gotten, professionally or otherwise?
I guess to me, it's less about like an explicit directive that like I was given at some point that was just like, oh, do what that person said. I would say it's more like, I think, implicit advice that I was raised in, which was like about being really loved and being okay exactly how I am, right? And so I think like my ability to be who I am in the world is really kind of like the root of that is being super loved up as a kid and not really questioning myself in a space at all. Just kind of being assured in a way that I think has maybe allowed me to be too forward in certain instances, but probably in most cases has, I think, allowed me to kind of exhibit, I think maybe just a level of leadership and authenticity that has helped my projects work. I guess it's less prescriptive than anything, you know, but I really think it was something that was kind of just like embedded into who I am, and I think is probably way more formative than any piece of like more prescriptive or tactical or strategic advice that I've gotten later on, because I think a lot of that has mostly been about discovering it, you know, just trying stuff.
Cool, man. Well, I thank you very much, Evan, for your time. This has been
This was
awesome.
fun.
Great chatting
Yeah,
with
dude.
you.
Likewise.
Podcast officially over. Thanks for listening to the Beat the Often Path podcast. If you've been enjoying this show, please like, comment, share, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, subscribe to me on YouTube. It would mean the world to me. Also, do you have an unusual success story, or do you know someone who does? Well, please recommend them to me. They could be a future guest on this show. Maybe they've rolled the largest boulder down the mountains of Tibet, or maybe they built the world's largest chicken farm in Madagascar. The point is, I don't know what I don't know, so I'm looking for inspiration and unusual success stories. So help me by being a part of this adventure. I'm looking to grow this podcast with you. Thanks again for listening.